Well, the trick question for most politicians, and especially now for Republican politicians, is what would you not do to get reelected? And sadly, most politicians don't have an answer to that question. In fact, they don't even understand the question because they would do anything. They would say anything. And that is certainly true of Trump-supporting Republicans who used to be opposed to tariffs, but now support Donald Trump's tariffs, even though they are illegal and unconstitutional. That is true of Republicans who used to support serious prison sentences for people convicted of violent crime, but now support Trump pardons and Trump cash for every violent criminal who attacked the Capitol on January 6th to try to overturn a presidential election for Donald Trump, including many of them whose publicly declared intent in the attack at the time was to assassinate the Vice President of the United States, to hang Mike Pence. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie found something that he would not do to get reelected. He would not try to help Donald Trump keep the Epstein files hidden inside the Trump Justice Department. And so Thomas Massie lost his reelection campaign tonight in Kentucky by 10 points in a Republican primary where Donald Trump supported Thomas Massie's opponent only because Thomas Massie, along with Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, did everything he possibly could do to successfully force the release of the Epstein files by law. That was his crime against Donald Trump. And 45% of Republicans in Thomas Massie's district sided with Thomas Massie in that election against Donald Trump. Thomas Massie knew that trying to get the Epstein files released would provoke vengeance from Donald Trump. Thomas Massie, like every other Republican member of the House and Senate, had every right to believe that most of his voters are still in the grip of Donald Trump. But helping Donald Trump hide the Epstein files was something that Thomas Massie just could not do, even though he knew that crossing Donald Trump could lose his reelection. We don't see this very often in our politics anymore. A politician knowingly taking the chance of defeat in reelection because there's something that he just could not do. In this case, something he couldn't do for Donald Trump. And now Donald Trump is testing Republicans in the House and Senate once again by creating what Senator Ron Wyden calls, quote, the most brazen theft and abuse of taxpayer dollars by any president in American history. And today, Donald Trump's acting attorney general refused to promise that none of the money that the attorney general will award to secret recipients of a new secret fund that Donald Trump's Treasury will supply to Donald Trump's Justice Department will go to Andrew Paul Johnson. Donald Trump's acting attorney general, who is Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, was asked if he would give money to Andrew Paul Johnson today, and he refused to answer. Donald Trump pardoned Andrew Paul Johnson and let him out of prison, where he was serving time for his violent participation in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And Andrew Paul Johnson, as soon as he got out of prison, publicly thanked Donald Trump and then immediately went back to sexually abusing children. Andrew Paul Johnson abused two children, a boy and a girl, aged 10 and 11, before he went to prison for his crimes on January 6th. And then he immediately went back to sexually abusing those same two children again as soon as Donald Trump let him out of prison. And now Andrew Paul Johnson has been sentenced to life in prison after a Florida jury found him guilty of 5 criminal charges, including molestation, lewd and lascivious exhibition, and transmission of material harmful to a minor. And today, Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's acting attorney general, said, in effect, it's possible that Andrew Paul Johnson will now get money from Donald Trump's secret fund as a reward for attacking the Capitol on January 6th.
Let me go back to this slush fund, because there's also an individual who, after being pardoned by the president, went on to molest 2 children. And that person actually tried to buy the silence of these children by saying that he would pay them some of the funds that he was hoping to get from your slush fund. Can you commit to making the rules so that that person is not eligible for a payout under this fund?
Well, you're obviously lying in your question, because there's no way that this person committed to that. The slush fund, as you call it, which is not, didn't exist.
I'm sure,
but I can commit.
Mr. Attorney General, don't ever do that again. I am reporting
what again?
What he said. He said on the expectation that he hoped to get some of the funds from a payout. He's been
from
hearing
you said from the
hearings.
slush fund, Senator, and that didn't exist when he said that.
This is the fund that the president and all of you have been telegraphing all along that you're going to use to help the president's friends.
Can you point to
Mr.
a single
Attorney General,
telegraph
I have a
I
last
made?
question.
What telegraph did I
have a last question for
Okay.
you. Do you know that it is a criminal offense to lie to Congress?
I am very well aware of that.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
NPR reports, quote, soon after his release, Johnson started posting online that he expected to receive restitution money from the Trump administration. So, long before Donald Trump's criminal compensation fund for criminals was announced yesterday, many of those criminals, rightly, it turns out, expected this money from Donald Trump. We will never know, according to the rules of the commission set up by Donald Trump and his acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, who actually applies for and receives any of the money from that fund. There is no limit on who can receive that money. And so we may never know if the child molester who Donald Trump pardoned, Andrew Paul Johnson, gets any money from Donald Trump's commission. Donald Trump, of course, didn't know he was pardoning a child molester when he pardoned Andrew Paul Johnson. And that means that Donald Trump will not know if he is giving money to child molesters through his fund, because that's not the kind of homework Donald Trump does. Donald Trump said today that he's just too busy to explain. He thereby became the first president in history who claimed to be too busy to explain the war that he is waging. Every wartime president prior to Donald Trump has been much busier in their workday and their weekends than Donald Trump. But none of them ever said they were too busy to explain the war that America was waging. That's Donald Trump's unique contribution to the role of commander-in-chief, too busy to explain. He told his absurd lie again today about those mythical 2 or 3 days, the magical 2 or 3 days in which he will negotiate some kind of agreement with Iran to end his war. Donald Trump first started promising those 2 or 3 days primarily to the stock market in the first week of his war. And now, in the 80th day of his war, he's still promising the 2 or 3 days. And what you can know for sure by now is that we are not 2 or 3 days away from the end of Donald Trump's war. And Iran obviously knows that, since Donald Trump has been telling that lie about Iran being ready within 2 or 3 days to agree to a deal with Donald Trump. It's Iran, after all, that Donald Trump is actually lying about when he uses that magic 2 or 3 days formulation. Imagine the Iranian regime sitting there listening to Donald Trump every week saying that they are going to come around in 2 or 3 days. Donald Trump said today that if he had time to explain it to people, everyone would support his war.
Everyone tells me it's unpopular, but I think it's very popular. When they hear that it's having to do with nuclear weapons, weapons that could take out Los Angeles, could take out major cities very quick. When they hear that, you know, when they're explaining, I'll tell you what, when we explain it to people, I don't really have enough time to explain to people. I'm too busy getting it done.
Of course, Iran does not have those weapons and actually put in writing in an agreement with President Obama that they would never pursue such weapons. Now, here's Donald Trump today not having enough time to explain his war to the American people.
I'm doing a job on the reflecting leg for a fraction of what they paid. Now, I've upgraded it I got so into it, I've upgraded it like you wouldn't believe. I'm doing all the walkways outside. I'm doing it properly. But it's a much bigger job. But you see it's happening now. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be waterproof. It's going to be reflecting again.
Yeah. He said the pool is going to be waterproof. Here's more of Donald Trump not having enough time to explain his war to the American people today.
This is a gift to the United States of America. And more than a gift, it's going to be one of the most beautiful buildings that's ever been built in the country or in Washington, D.C. So here's the other facade, see over here. And again, this is taken, these great classical buildings, they're taken out of different parts of the world from very glamorous times. This is Rome. They like the flat roof. Greece likes they call it the triangles, and you see that. This is a porch that looks out over the city. Also, it's developed in such a way that we can have military there, but the entire roof is developed for military. They're very high. They're higher than just about anything else. They have a 360-degree vision of Washington, D.C. They have a massive drone capacity. Not only is it drone-proof, if a drone hits it, it bounces off. It won't have any impact.
No time to explain his war.